and welcome to Discovering Orthodox Christianity. I'm Stacy Spanos, your host for this series of programs designed to explain the basic teachings of Orthodox Christianity. We're honored to be filming at the gorgeous Holy Cross Chapel on the campus of Hellenic College, Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology in Boston. Today's program is called Ministering to Our Elderly. It's a very important part of our church. Our guest today is the Very Reverend Dr. Nathanael Symeonides, pastor of Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church in New York City. Thanks so much for joining us, Father.
Thank you.
In some cultures, the elderly are valued tremendously. I don't know if that's so true in America. How does the Orthodox Church perceive the elderly, and especially within our parishes?
Well, for starters, I don't know if we can say that in America we don't necessarily value the elderly. I think people love their elders and want to do what's right. But in terms of how the church sees the elderly, I think we can say that we understand them as a treasure chest of wisdom and full of experiences. And I'm reminded of a passage from the book of Job where God reminds Job that wisdom lies with the elderly, with age, and that understanding comes in time. And so we can say that our elderly, the older folks, are necessary. We need them. They're part of who we are. And the church wants to take care of them the best way we can. And if you think about how Christ takes care of his mother while he's on the cross, the Panagia at that time is much older. He doesn't abandon her, but he makes sure that someone is going to take care of her, and he offers her to St. John the Evangelist, his disciple, to care for her. So the church indeed values and cares for the elderly. In
this country, the baby boomers are aging. They're calling it the silver tsunami. Something like 10,000 per day will be entering retirement age. How will this affect the church in the coming years? Will it affect the church?
Well, if we think about who the baby boomers are and their experiences, we can get a sense of what's to come with this tsunami, the silver tsunami, is that what it is? The baby boomers grew up and were part of social change, proponents of social change. I mean, they experienced the Vietnam War, protested against the war. They saw the assassination of President Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. They were advocates and supporters of various movements, the women's movement, civil rights movement, the environmental movement, wanted the freedom of sexual expression. And so they were not, and they are not, a group that would just go along with the status quo. Right. The baby boomers also, if we look at their importance and the impact they have on society today, they control approximately 80% of personal assets. It lies with that generation, and they basically are responsible for 50% of spending. So our economy heavily depends on that generation. But even more important than that, because of the fact that they're so connected to social change and making a difference, the baby boomers are also a group of people that want to make a change by supporting different causes. And a recent study has shown that more than 50% of baby boomers are more likely to leave their inheritance with charitable institutions than with their children, because they feel like these charities that they support, that share their worldview, will make a difference in the world. So they still, even though they're getting older, this generation wants to make a difference. And I guess lastly, and perhaps more important for the church, the baby boomers' perception of religion is perhaps very unique. If we consider that approximately 40 to 45% of baby boomers have turned their back on religion, formal religion, they have left a church or a synagogue, or they don't associate themselves with a religion. About 30% of that group currently is still involved in their communities, in their faith tradition. And then about 25% or so of the baby boomers are trying to get back and trying to reconnect with a religion.
And is that an opportunity for the church to try to draw them back in?
Absolutely, it is, but we have to be careful because that particular group, they understand religion as something very personal, something that can't be limited by an institution. And so again, going back to this social change, not accepting what you're being told, it affects how they understand religion and their place, let's say, in the church. So the church does indeed have a chance not only to change the way that 25%, the ones who consider themselves spiritual or religious but not really that connected and involved in the church, that we can change how they understand their identity as Orthodox Christians, but also we have an opportunity and a calling, as His Eminence the Archbishop has told us, to go and find the unchurched, those who have turned their back, the baby boomers that are not connected to any religious tradition, to sort of minister to them, to find them.
And yet those who are still spiritually connected to their faith, I guess that could be their opportunity to mold their particular parish into charitable endeavors. Because you said they're socialists, not socialists, pardon me. They're socially active.
In a good sense, yes. They're socialists and very socially conscious.
There you go, thank you.
And indeed, that group that is willing and eager to make a difference through the church can shape their peers, can shape their parishes. And in many ways, that's the group that is still sort of leading the efforts of the church, or at least local parishes. It's that demographic, that age group. One of the things that we have to also consider is how this group will affect future generations.
How so?
Well, if you think of the person who's right around 60, 65, ready to retire or maybe not interested, but about that age, they are probably, if not just parents, but grandparents, okay? These grandparents have the chance to shape the lives of their grandchildren. Will they be the grandparent that brings their grandchildren to the church, that introduces them to Christ, like in many ways they were introduced by their grandparents? Or will they be the grandparents that will choose to take their child or grandchild to a soccer game or to hockey practice on Sunday and consider that more important than, living your Christian faith?
There are so many medical challenges as we age. You have an aging parent. I have two aging parents. Does the church take a position on certain things? And I want to go down the line and ask you, living wills, does the church make any rules about that?
Well, living wills are important, and the church has some resources. Our archdiocese provides some templates that people can follow when trying to create a living will. And what the church would say with regard to living wills is, are we maintaining the freedom of the person? That's very important. Is a person choosing something to live in their will because they were coerced, or is this a choice that they truly want and reflects their understanding of life?
And this goes hand in hand with the do-not-resuscitate order. Some people choose, if they are in cardiac arrest or at a critical point in their life, that they don't want to be resuscitated. Is that okay with the Orthodox faith?
Well, a DNR, or do-not-resuscitate order, is something that, especially as we get much older in life, when we're hospitalized, if we haven't already given our opinion on whether or not we want to be resuscitated if we go in for major surgery and we have we go into cardiac arrest, doctors will ask patients, what do they want? What is your preference? If you're 90 or so, or whatever age, and you're going in for major surgery and you're battling cancer, life, and or you're in pain and we're going to go in and try to help, but your heart stops. What is your choice? And the church doesn't say, officially the church doesn't say yay or nay, okay? But the church, again, will respect whether or not a person says, I am okay with embracing what's to come, death. And whether it comes because I fall asleep and I don't wake up, or comfortably at home, or because my heart stops in the middle of surgery, I'm okay with that. The church embraces that, and the church also embraces that person that says, no, resuscitate me and bring me back and do whatever you can to, get my heart beating again.
How about organ transplant?
Organ transplantations, that's a little more complex. I mean, on the one hand, you have the issue of donation.
Right,
and
after
who is a donor? When does it occur?
Can we donate our organs, either as a living donor or after we pass?
So as living donors, we're able to donate specific kinds of organs. Obviously, organs that are not going to, once donated, end our lives. So we can donate a kidney, we can donate even blood. I mean, people don't think of blood as an organ, but it's tissue that we can donate, and the church embraces that and allows that, as long as it's done with consent and informed consent. The donor understands what it is that he or she is doing. With regard to viable organs, or organs that are connected to maintaining life, those can only come after the donor has died. Okay.
And the church is okay with that?
Well, the church hasn't really said what its official position is. Right now, the church wants to make sure that there is consent, that whoever accepts to be a donor of viable organs after they have passed have given their consent, have understood what's to come, and they were never coerced, that money was never exchanged, and so forth, to keep the process as objective as possible and as free as possible. With regard to accepting organs, the church, again, will never say to someone, don't seek to receive a heart transplant or a liver transplant. Just accept your fate as God's will for you, and just roll over and die. The church will never say that. The church will say, if indeed you see this as a test from God, if you see your ailment as an opportunity to grow in patience and love for God, for your neighbor, and you are okay with enduring and ultimately maybe dying from this, it's okay. Life doesn't just end after our organs stop beating. But if somebody wants to receive that liver, the heart, the lungs that will extend life, the church cannot say to them, don't do it. And says, if this is something that you want right now, the church is going to support you, will be there by your side. So officially, we haven't said yes or no, but it's a gray matter right now.
And I don't want to get too dark, but this is definitely something that goes hand in hand with people who are aging, when they may be suffering from an incurable disease, when they're feeling a lot of pain. Euthanasia and suicide. What are the positions of the church on those issues?
Yes, so euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, those are similar.
I'm talking about suicide. I'm take it upon myself to end my life because of my pain.
Yeah, that's something that the church does not accept and has never accepted. Whether you end your life yourself at home, or you are in a hospital and you ask a physician to help you end your life, that is not considered a good death. So the meaning of euthanasia, good death, Euthanasia, kalos thanatos, that is not a good death in the eyes of the church.
Would you not be buried by an Orthodox priest in that event?
Well, the church would have to consider each case on an individual basis, and depending on the circumstances and what has led someone to end their own lives, the church would have to determine whether it's something that can apply economia and bury the person, or if indeed it has to adhere to the strict rule and not bury the person.
I know these are tough matters to talk about, and certainly I hope as a priest of a parish you never encounter them, but certainly some people do face these in their lives, and I think we should lay it out for them so they have the knowledge of it.
Well, I think most parish priests go through it, and I don't know if I would ever want someone to say to me, I hope you never have to go through this as a parish priest, because if we do experience this as parish priests, it means that people are at least asking us. They're coming to the church. They want to know what they may or may not do, what is consistent with their Orthodox faith, with the Orthodox mind. So as priests, we have to be prepared to help, to guide, to give them the truth, even if it's very difficult.
But if there's one thing I've taken away from this series of interviews, is the compassion, the great compassion that the church has for its people.
Absolutely. I mean, the compassion that the church has is the same compassion that Christ had for his disciples, for the world. We cannot approach these matters and the elderly, caring for the elderly, ministering to the elderly with just cold rules, with austerity necessarily, but with compassion.
Father, let me ask you about the sandwich generation. You and I had just brought this up. Younger generations now taking care of not just their own children, but their aging parents as well. Is there something that the church can do to give them assistance?
Sandwich generation. So we are between the bun, so to speak. We are caring for children, right? And we're also caring for adults, and that's what sort of, and the caregivers constitute the meat between the bread. In my opinion, the church can do several things. Obviously, the first and maybe the most practical and the easiest thing for the church to do is to offer resources. Written material, guidelines, or helpful tools that people can refer to officially, expressing what the church understands. Like I said, maybe giving them templates for creating a living will, or how to think about a medical proxy. So as caregivers, we are often forced to make these decisions, and if we don't have the resources in hand, it's kind of difficult. The second thing the church can do, and I think this is very important, is to remind us that we're not alone, that there are other slices of salami and meat within the sandwich, that the caregivers of children and elderly, there are others around that are going through the same thing that you and I are going through now, that we can learn from each other, to bring us together, to help us network, to help us talk, communicate. Many times people who offer care, especially to the elderly, they become very angry and resentful. And others, of course, go the opposite way and are very happy that they have this opportunity to help the elderly and their kids. But many of them are angry at siblings. Why can't my sister or brother help? Why is it always up to me? So the church can bring us together and help us talk to one another. And lastly, I think, and most importantly, the church can embrace us. And I think this is where the church can continue to serve as the hospital, to help us go and open our hearts, whether it's to the priest, to a bishop, to help us, confess what we're going through, to help lift the burden off of our shoulders, to give us Christ's yoke, which is much lighter than the burden that we sort of assume on a regular basis.
What housing options are available for the elderly of the Orthodox faith?
Well, obviously, ideally, you would hope that an older person can stay at home or in an environment that reminds them of their home, whether it's their own home and a child visits them, or a caregiver, a nurse will visit them at home, and that's often, an option. But when a person gets too old and can't care for themselves, or there isn't anyone there to help them, we have obviously nursing homes or homes for the elderly. And our archdiocese, of course, has the St. Michael's home that has been caring for the elderly for decades.
What city is that in?
That's in New York. And it's a home that has cared for our elderly, that has provided them with a home that reminds them of their own home. It's not an institution, it's not a hospital, it's not a nursing home, it's their home, it's St. Michael's, and it offers them everything that they were used to receiving when they lived at home, including a chapel where they can go and worship with their fellow neighbor.
That's got to bring a big sense of comfort.
It does.
Especially for those who still speak exclusively Greek, or that's their predominant language, their favorite language.
Well, but yes, so many of the residents currently either only speak Greek or very limited English, and so it's nice because we're still in that generation that really never learned to master the English language. So they have a home where they can go and speak to their roommate And if it was not available, they may be in a room with someone who only spoke English, and they would never communicate.
How can we reverse the negative image that some people in the Orthodox faith, not just of the Orthodox faith, but in our culture in general, have of assisted living facilities?
Well, part of that is up to us to maintain high standards, to insist that these facilities are indeed caring for the elderly and not just putting them in a room or in a home and collecting their Social Security check. So that's our job, to insist that regulations are strict and that they adhere to the rules, that they provide our people with a safe environment, a loving environment. So that's what we can do right away. The other thing is to also try to support our own homes, our own facilities, St. Michael's in New York, the Hellenic Nursing Home in Canton, Massachusetts, for us to get involved, to go in and to talk to people, to visit the elderly, to make sure that we know whether there is a parishioner of ours that has moved from their home to their new home, wherever that may be, whether it's an Orthodox or Hellenic nursing home or some other organization that's running it, that we go and visit them. And if possible, bring them to church, if they can even leave and go on trips.
I know priests have so much responsibility within their parishes. One of the things that you do is go visit people who are sick in the hospital. If somebody is watching now and maybe disconnected from their Orthodox faith but wants to get and learn more about it, and they are going through a tough time right now, perhaps they're in the hospital, or perhaps they love somebody who is in the hospital, is it okay to reach out to the priest to ask, please come and see my loved one, or please come see me?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're there for. A priest is not there to push a pen and sit behind a desk. The job of the priest is not to be a fundraiser. It's not to be a friend raiser. It's not to do any of that. Sometimes we're forced to do it, and we do it with great joy. The role of the priest is to share the love of Christ with his people and to help bring people to Christ. So if people have a family or a friend, a family member or a friend in a nursing home or an assisted living facility, please, by all means, reach out to the priest.
One of the beautiful things that Metropolitan Nicholas of Detroit said was to let people know who may be sick that they are not untouchable. Sometimes a priest's touch alone will let people who are suffering know that they are loved.
Well, touch and physically being present is so important. I mean, if the personal touch wasn't critical in maintaining the joy in our lives, then why would we get together in church? Why would we speak to one another? We can stay behind our closed doors and communicate via phone and now through Skype and all this. So indeed, touching and being present, physically present, whether it's sending a card, and writing a note to somebody, having them read it and touch that card, or visiting them, embracing them, and the role of the priest, giving them Holy Communion, continuing that connection that these people have had with Christ, offering them the sacraments. That should not stop just because their living arrangements have changed.
Father, was it you that was telling me earlier today about one of your parishioners who was in her 90s? That was not you?
Oh, yes.
Tell me about how your elderly parishioners touch you.
So we have, of course, being on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, we have a diverse community. We have families with kids, we have middle-aged people, we have a few very, very or older folks. And there are two that come to mind. The first is still alive and the other has passed, but we have a parishioner by the name of Pagona. I won't use her last name just to maintain her privacy, but Pagona is, I believe, 95 years old. She travels from Brooklyn. Okay, she travels from Brooklyn every time we have a service or an activity at the church. She is not afraid to get on the train to come to our church, even though there is a church 4 blocks away from her home. And
she's just got to go to that one,
She has to come to us
Yeah.
because she's connected. That is her community.
That's her church.
And so even though she can go anywhere and do the same thing, she feels at home there. So she comes to us and she lets us know every year when we cut the Vasilopita that
Tell people what that is if they don't know.
The Vasilopita is a traditionally a sweetbread that we cut New Year's Day in remembrance of Saint Basil and his charity and the works that he did to help the poor. But we cut a piece and we give it to either each parishioner or a parishioner that represents a specific organization or ministry in the church. And she has to make sure that she receives the piece for the oldest parishioner in the parish. And she's not afraid to say, I'm 95, that's my piece, where's my piece? So we give it to her, but we also had another woman, her name was Catherine, and she died at the age of 102. And so she was part of the Annunciation from the very beginning. And the Annunciation is one of the oldest Greek Orthodox churches in the United States, and it was established in 1892. So she was part of this community from the very beginning. And our church has moved from one location to the next. And in 1955, we found our current home. And we purchased this sanctuary, the whole campus, from the Presbyterians. And it became our permanent home. But at the time, people didn't have much. They didn't have a lot of money. Our community in general was not well connected. We did not have wealthy donors. And this woman and her husband basically used their home as collateral for us to buy the church. And they were not eager to get paid or to pay off the mortgage so that they can reclaim their home. They were willing to lose their home for this church. So we owe a lot to our elderly, and we're very grateful that we have them with us.
What should we be doing as parishioners when we see that elderly member that, of course, we have seen for many years but may not know that well? What do you recommend that we do to make them welcome and to also, I guess, give them their due?
I don't know if there's, I mean, obviously we can say we should reach out to them, we should embrace them, we should say hello, we should speak to them, we should make them feel at home, but that would assume that they need something from us. You know, that assumes that they are not at home, and we are the ones that have to sort of give. And in many ways, our elderly fathers and mothers have much to give to us. And what I think we ought to be doing is remembering, as the book of Psalms says, that the elderly still bear fruit, and they're still green and have much sap to give. And so it's not so much what can we do for them, but how can we be a family? How can we continue to grow together, even though now you have in the room, you know, children, young adults, you know, older adults, and now the very, very old. And how does our work continue?
Father Nathanael, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
To see more programs in this series, please log on to our YouTube channel. It is youtube.com/Greek Orthodox Church. I'm Stacey Spanos. Thanks for joining us.